And it's time for Chapter 18 of the Landry News. Censorship plus computers equals no way. Joey sat next to Kara on the bus that Monday afternoon. He was quiet, and so was Kara. Even after all the explanations, she still felt responsible for the whole mess, especially for what was happening to Mr. Larson. There was a lot to think about. Joey broke the silence with a question. So you're going to keep on publishing the paper anyway, right? Kara's ponytail wagged as she shook her head. We can't, Joey. If we don't obey the rules, it will just make it harder for Mr. Larson. They were quiet again, looking out the windows on opposite sides of the bus for the next 2 stops. Then, as if a puppet master had rotated their heads at exactly the same moment, they faced each other and both started talking at once. But the letter said the Landry News, said Kara. It didn't say stop all newspapers. I know, blurted Joey. As long as we don't make a newspaper at school or pass it out there, we can publish anything we want to as long as it's true. Joey was practically shouting. And why? Because it's a free country, that's why. Kara had hold of Joey's arm, squeezing it, and her voice had gone up an octave. So you've got a computer, right? She asked. Joey nodded, and Kara went on. And you've got a printer, too? Joey nodded again and said, It's not as big as the one at school, but it's a good one, and it even prints in color. We'll have to redesign everything for a smaller sheet size, but that's okay because it's a whole new paper anyway. Kara stayed on the bus and rode to Joey's stop. Leanne and Alan and Ed had joined the conversation, and in 4 minutes, they had already taken a unanimous vote on the new name that Ed came up with. By the time they got off the bus and had begun to walk the last block to Joey's house, the publishing committee had offered Kara Landry the job of editor-in-chief for a brand new newspaper, The Guardian. And she accepted, provided that the motto of the new paper could still be the same, truth and mercy. Halfway through science class on Friday morning, Mrs. Cormier arrived with an invitation for Kara Landry. The principal wanted to talk to her. A few minutes later, Kara sat across the desk from Dr. Barnes. She was glad she had experience in these matters. Kara had observed quite a few angry school administrators, at least one a week for most of 4th grade. She had developed what she called the Matameter. It was a scale from 1 to 10, where 1 equals mild tremor and 10 equals erupting volcano. Judging from the color of his face, the rate of his breathing, the flare of his nostrils, and the fact that both doors of his office were closed, Kara thought that Dr. Barnes was probably at about an 8, the steaming mudslide stage. She waited politely for Dr. Barnes to begin the conversation. He slid a copy of The Guardian across the desk and turned it around so she could see it. The headline of the lead story was, Why the First Amendment is First. The article laid out the situation involving the Landry News, Mr. Larson, Denton Elementary School, and the Carleton School Board. Dr. Barnes had to admit to himself that it was a masterful piece of reporting. The story was honest. It was impartial, and it lived up to the newspaper's motto. Dr. Barnes cleared his throat and said, What is your connection with this newspaper, Kara? Kara disliked being treated like a baby. The masthead of the newspaper was on the front page, as plain as the nose on Dr. Barnes's face, and his nose was very plain where Kara was sitting. The masthead listed all the workers on the paper, all 23 kids in Mr. Larson's afternoon class had wanted their names in the masthead, and each had done something to help get the Guardian pulled together in record time. Kara and Joey had gotten the idea on Monday afternoon, and the first edition had been ready to distribute today, Friday morning. Dr. Barnes was a tempting target, but Kara didn't get snippy, and she didn't get angry. She didn't even get sarcastic. She pointed meekly at the masthead. It says what everyone does for the paper right here in the masthead. I'm the editor-in-chief. Dr. Barnes said, I see. And weren't you the editor-in-chief of the Landry News as well? Kara nodded. Yes, until Mr. Larson told us we had to stop publishing it for a while. Kara already knew exactly where Dr. Barnes was heading with this. She did not want to suffer through a long and boring cat and mouse question session. Kara wanted to lay it all out on the table, and she also wanted Dr. Barnes to know right away that she saw what he was up to. So before Dr. Barnes could ask his next question, Kara said, "You probably think that this paper is just like the Landry News, only with a different name, but it's not. Dr. Barnes, first, the Landry News was written and assembled and produced during school hours on school property, using school equipment and supplies. The Guardian was written outside of school, and it was produced in a private home using privately owned equipment and supplies. Second, the Landry News was distributed to students by other students during school hours on school property. The Guardian is distributed by a group of kids to their friends on privately owned property before or after school hours. And third, the Landry News was supervised by Mr. Larson, and from the second edition to the 9th and final edition, Mr. Larson saw every copy of it. The Guardian was thought up and created independently by only the friends listed here in the masthead, without adults being involved at all." Kara hadn't meant to push Dr. Barnes up toward the erupting volcano point, but the lava was starting to flow anyway. He glared at her and jabbed at the paper with his blunt index finger. "Young lady, do you mean to tell me that you did not intend to distribute these papers at school today? These papers are all over this school and all over the floors and all of the buses." Kara said mildly, "We didn't bring a single paper to school, honest. We have friends at almost every bus stop, and we had our newspapers ready this morning. So we handed them out. We even made sure that we stayed in someone's yard instead of on the sidewalk, because the sidewalk is owned by the town, and when kids are waiting for the school bus there, it's like school property. But after we handed the papers to our friends, where they took them, well, that wasn't up to us." Kara leaned forward and pointed at the little symbol Joey had added to the bottom of the front page. "We even reminded kids to be sure to recycle the paper." Kara sat up straighter in her chair and said, "Hey, I know. Next week we'll add 'Please don't litter' and see if that helps." Kara paused a minute, smiling absently at Dr. Barnes. Even his earlobes were red now. "And guess what?" said Kara brightly. "What?" Dr. Barnes said, almost in a whisper. "If you flip that paper over down at the bottom, you can see our internet address. Isn't that cool? By this time next week, the Guardian will be online, and our internet edition won't use any paper at all. No litter. Isn't that great?" Dr. Barnes disliked displays of emotion, especially anger. It wasn't professional. So in an abnormally quiet voice, Dr. Barnes says, "Yes, that is a fine idea, Kara. Well then, please go out to the front office now and ask Mrs. Cormier for a pass to your class and close the door behind you, please." 2 minutes later, Kara left the office. Dr. Barnes' door was still shut. If it hadn't been against the rules, Kara Landry would have skipped down the hall all the way back to her science class. On your post today, I just want you to put a 1 through 10, 1 being the lowest, 10 being the highest. How mad do you think Dr. Barnes is right now? Have a great day.